We're going to set up the Xamarin Mac agent here on Windows to connect to a networked Mac in order to farm out some of the Xamarin iOS build process over to the Mac. Remember that we have two machines involved here. We have a Mac with Visual Studio and Xamarin iOS installed, and then this Windows machine here, again with Visual Studio and Xamarin iOS installed. And the key guidance is those two machines should have the same version of Xamarin iOS installed. And the easiest way to make sure that the versions will be compatible is to just always keep both products up to date. So the first thing I'm going to do here is check for updates. And you can see everything is up to date. Now it's time to start the Windows side of the connection process. Currently, I do not have a Xamarin iOS project open, so I'm going to go Tools, Options, and at the bottom there's a Xamarin node with a iOS settings option inside it. And then there's this button here that starts the connection process. If I did have a Xamarin iOS project open, then there would be a button up here in the toolbar that would do the same thing. So when I click this, the Windows side is going to search for Macs that are accessible on my network. And there's my Mac already located. If the Mac you're interested in isn't listed here, you can manually add the IP address using the Add Server option right here. But this is the one I want, so I'm going to select it and click Connect. And there's a couple of things to note at this point. Notice that I have to enter a username and password here. Let me jump over to the Mac here for a moment. I have the system preferences open in the sharing section. And you can see I have this Xamarin test account listed. That's the account that we want to use to connect to this Mac. The way it's listed here, Xamarin space test, that's not the actual username though. If I launch terminal, you can see the actual username there, or if I do who am I, you can see it listed there. So that right there, Xamarin test, along with this account's password, is what I need to enter over on the Windows side into the Xamarin Mac agent. And now we're back over on Windows, and we know what we need to enter here. And by the way, over on the Mac, the same user must be logged in currently in order to accept the SSH connection from the Windows side. If you're not logged in over on the Mac, you'll get an error message here on Windows that's very specific. Okay, and now we're connected. Let's create a test app to make sure everything's working. We'll do a single view app. And notice now that we have an iOS app open, there's a button up there on the toolbar that will launch the Xamarin Mac agent window. And you can see that we are connected to the build host over on the Mac. There's three things the Mac agent's going to do for us. The first is help us run the storyboard UI designer over here on Windows. Let's just put something in the UI so we can see it run later. All right, the next thing that the build host will do for us is help us actually do the build. So when I start this build process over here on Windows, part of the process will actually run on the Mac. And you'll see in the output window here, it's going to say connecting to Mac right there. And the last thing that it does for us is help us actually run the app. So I'm just going to hit run here to execute it on the simulator. What's happening at this point, the simulator is actually running over on the Mac. So here we are on the Mac. We're logged into that same account. We see the simulator launch. In a moment, we'll see our splash screen. There it is. And then our single view saying hello. Now, if you're running the Enterprise edition of Visual Studio, you have one more option. In the Tools Options, Xamarin iOS settings, there's a box there that says Remote Simulator to Windows. And now when we run it again, this time the simulator is still running over there on the Mac. However, over here on Windows, we're going to get a remote view of the simulator so we can look at the app and interact with it all here on Windows.